Hello and welcome to High Performance Imports V7 Part 2 commentary. This was a fun trip I did just after the Tokyo Auto Salon. I took the train all the way out to Fukui, which is on the west coast of Japan, and at that time of year, it's already starting to snow up in the mountains. If I'd been any later, there would have been snow on the road too. If you saw the Sendai drag strip coverage in the video not long before this one, you would have seen Yokoyama-san standing on the drag strip behind the black R34 GTR, which was one of the reasons I decided it was time to go and have a look at their workshop. The funny thing is, it turned out to be Yokoyama-san's birthday when I got there, and he very kindly invited me to his birthday party as well. So it was a pretty fun day all round. Anyway, let's get into it.
Phoenix's Power always have a big presence at the auto salon. This time they had customer cars on the stand, showing what they can do for real street applications. The most extreme was this R34 GTR with twin 3240 turbos, which still has a full standard interior. After the show, we finally had a chance to go and visit the workshop in Fukui. The R34 had already been stripped down for another engine rebuild. Fukui is on Japan's west coast, more than 3 hours by train from either Osaka or Tokyo. Despite the distance, Phoenix's Power, also known as Garage Fukui, is widely regarded as one of the top workshops in Japan. In the car park you'll find most of their previous demo cars, including the MR2s they are most famous for.
Yeah, they did lots of stuff for MR2s back then. Oh, they may still do. Yeah, pretty much anything you could name as far as body kits, rear intercooler kits, special suspension, and exhaust manifolds. Yeah, you name it. They really got into the MR2 when most other workshops at the time kind of ignored it. But we talk about that a bit more in the interview later.
This S14 is also the fastest SR20 engine car in Japan, making an amazing 900 PS.
Yeah, that used to be an awful lot of power from an SR, but not so much now. I'm using PS in this video, which is what they use in Japan. It means power stroke, and it's also used in Europe. But it's sort of a metric version of horsepower, so it's slightly less. Like 1 PS is slightly less than 1 horsepower. The 1 horsepower is 0.746 kilowatts. So I don't know why it wound up being slightly different, but generally in Japan they do quote power outputs in PS. But if you think of it in horsepower, it's close enough.
2 years ago, this Pulsar and Sora made a big impact at various shows, but now they have been sold to customers. One of their own staff bought the R34 GTT, which may be rebuilt again soon.
You can tell the age of a demo car by the wheels that are on it. Those Volks were getting a little bit old already by then.
Inside they have a full range of parts on display, including their own suspension kits and departure exhaust systems.
I remember seeing that exhaust system on a lot of Pulsar GTIRs. Certainly looked pretty cool with the tips pointing out in opposite directions.
This TVIS killer kit for the 3S GTE is one of their original products.
TVIS, I'm guessing what it stood for. I think it was Throttle Variable Intake System. It was a plate that went in between the inlet manifold and the head, and it had a throttle in it which was supposed to help bottom end torque, I think. At the time, a few different manufacturers were experimenting with that kind of thing, but ultimately it didn't help bottom end torque much, and it restricted power in the top end. So as soon as you're doing some serious engine modifications to a 3S GTE, you probably want to get rid of that. This billet plate is a very easy way to do it.
When you find a shop with a T88 kit on the shelf, along with many others, you know they build a lot of tough cars.
Yeah, just like so many Japanese workshops, there's a whole load of turbos just sitting on the shelf in the showroom. Always made it fun.
This fully built GTR engine was tucked away in one corner. It uses a pair of Apex's new AX75 turbos, each rated to 650 PS, with twin wastegates to match. The company president, Yokoyama-san, showed us around his workshop. This customer's R34 GTR is using one of the AX75 turbos for everyday street driving.
It's a pretty well set up car for a street car. The twin Z32 airflow meters on there. Those AX75 turbos, they never really seemed to get very popular. I think Trust and HKS had a bit of momentum already at that point. But you would see people using them, especially in street cars, just to be different as much as anything, I think.
An MR2 in the corner was getting the works, including a T51R ball bearing turbo and rear mount intercooler.
That is a really big turbo for a four-cylinder. I mean, they're rated at 1,000 horsepower. I have seen cars that do make 1,000 horsepower with them, so pretty huge.
This valve-side-bodied Evo had just been finished when we arrived, so we stayed to watch the dyno tuning. The car was strapped down with sandbags front and rear, so we figured it would be worth watching. This engine uses a Truss T67 25G turbo, with many other special features like the custom inlet manifold and infinity throttle.
That, by contrast, is not a very big turbo, sort of mid 500 horsepower. It was a pretty popular turbo to put on RB25s, so it's reasonably big when you put it on a 2-litre, but you're not going to see the crazy numbers.
Yokoyama-san does most of the tuning himself on a laptop. One of the mechanics sprays a mist of water over the intercooler during the dyno runs to reduce heat soak. We had a feeling he wouldn't be happy with 489 PS. Sure enough, the next run pushed it to 509.
Yeah, those old CRT monitors were annoying. Luckily, I was able to get that freeze frame so it was readable. This type of dyno, of course, gives you more or less the power at the flywheel. So 509, it's pretty much what you'd expect unless you're running race fuel.
Inside the shop there are records for power figures recorded on this dyno.
These boards are pretty cool. They showed all of the figures for different sort of classes of engine. This is the engine tune class in 2 litres, or roughly 2 litres. The top one is the S14 we mentioned before. So it's SR20 taken out to 2.2 full tune. Basically means they've got rods and pistons in it. Next thing down is the inlet and exhaust cam degrees. The injector size, it says R gas, meaning that was tuned on race fuel. And it's got the FCON V Pro HCAS computer running 2.3 kilos of boost, which is pretty close to 2.3 bar, 9,000 RPM. The next 2 cars after that are actually 3S GTE, so there would have been Toyota MR2s. Again, it's a full tune 2.2, but with a T88 turbo, 280-degree cams, 850cc injectors, presumably normal street fuel, with a Power FC computer, 2.2 bar of boost, and quite high RPM. Obviously, not being able to tune on racing fuel makes quite a big difference because you can see the difference in power output there. The advantage of the racing fuel, obviously, it's much higher octane, so you can run more ignition advance, even when you're running really high boost like those two. The next one down seems like a really close tune to the one before it, and yet the power is a whole lot lower. Anyway, we'll move on to the next class. Actually, before I do, I'll just mention that below the power outputs, there's the torque output, which in Japan they always put in kilogram meters. To turn that into Newton meters, you multiply by 9.8. And then from there, if you want pound feet, I think you have to divide by 0.736. So I'll let you do that yourself.
This car just sneaks into 10th place.
The top 4 cars on this list are all Toyota 2JZ engines, which is not very surprising. The top one is the only one that's actually got a built bottom end. The others, they say normal engine, meaning basically from the head gasket down, it's standard. So we'll be looking at T88 running 1.9 bar of boost, 2 fuel pumps and a surge tank, and Power C computer, presumably on normal fuel. So that's a pretty good output, really. As I said, the next 2 down both have normal internals, but they're running the same turbo, nearly, just a different exhaust housing, I think. Interestingly, they're all running up to 8,000 RPM. Certainly in an engine with normal internals, it's about as far as we want to push a 2JZ. They're fairly long strokes, so they don't like revving super hard.
For RB26 engines, the black R34 we saw before tops the list with 993 P.
So here you've got some pretty typical GTR engines. That black R34 is actually running standard capacity, 2.6, but full tuned bottom end. With 280 and 290-degree cams, FCON V Pro, 2.4 bar of boost and running up to 10,000 RPM. The one below that's running a pair of TD06 thrust turbos, 2.7 litre bottom end, a little bit smaller cams, a little bit less boost, 2.1 bar, but still running to 10,000 RPM. And the one after that, T88 34D, quite a large one, same one that was on that top super engine, the previous list. Another 2.7 full tune bottom end, same cams, Z32 airflows, Power FC, 2.2 bar of boost, and slightly less RPM. So it's interesting to see what different results you get with what appear to be similar setups, really. Probably worth noting that that third one running a power of C. From memory, if you're running a power of C, you have to run airflow meters, which is why they've mentioned the Z32 airflows.
Yes.
At the top there it says wastegate turbo class, meaning external wastegate, so definitely not a low mount setup.
Even on the low mount turbo list, the top dog makes 645.
Top says actuator turbine class. Turbine is turbo in Japanese. They've all got normal internals, although the top one says it's got head tuning, which may mean porting. It's got R34 in1 turbos, which are made by Nismo, and they were surprisingly good turbos. A lot of people used them in tuning cars. It's running a power FC, so 1.8 bar a boost, 8,500 RPM. It's a pretty stout thing. The next one is GTSS turbos, which were a entry-level turbo that HKS made. And again, it's just got bolt-in injector upgrade and a power FC and 1.5 bar a boost. So that's the sort of power you'd normally expect for that kind of a setup. And the one below is T517Z turbos, which were also a sort of an entry-level turbo from Trust. The third one on the list actually says original CPU, which I assume would be Phoenix Power's own plug-in CPU replacement. From number 5 down, actually, they're all just boost up, meaning factory turbos, and the internals are standard. Even though they're running about 1.2 bar a boost. So it shows what you can get from a basically stock RB26 engine, you know.
95% はストリートのお客さんで、たまにほんの少しドラッグレースもしくはサーキットレースの車作りを依頼される場合はあります。
今の工藤さんのはそれはお客さんの？
お客さんのです。
今のタイムが You'll pretty much never see this guy without that hat on, especially if he knows he's being photographed or videoed. Also, I just noticed he's got a copy of High Performance Imports open in front of him, which I presumably gave to him that day.
あれはね、あの車は出来上がったばっかりでまだ完全に測れてないんです。で、測ろうとすると、この間1回仙台へ行った時には測ろうとしたんですけどシャフトが折れて、で測れなくて、でもどうでしょう、コンディションが良ければ9秒前半ぐらいはいける車だと思ってます。そうです、1000馬力ちょうどぐらい。今新しいエンジンになったんで、ノーマル通常ガソリンで1100馬力ぐらいいくんじゃないかな。でレース用ガソリンを使えば1200馬力は越すと思います。はい。ホリンジャーオーストラリアのホリンジャー6速ミッション。
前は一番速い GTR は
9秒10。9秒10。ただそれ
Phoenix's power was one of the original RH9 workshops. That was a big deal in the late 90s when workshops were trying to run a 9-second pass in a GTR with street tires. So getting into that club, so to speak, was very important.
これはもう4年前ぐらいに出したタイムかなそこからはもうあんまりタイムアタックいかなかったんで、4年前ぐらいに9秒1出した時は当時では相当速い方のタイムだったんで、もうこれならいいだろうっていうもう十分だっていうんで あまり04に真剣にいかなかったんですよね。
それは
R33 で。
HPL の M2 はちょっと有名でしょ。
はいはいはい。MR2 のお客さんはすごく多いですね。オーストラリアのお客さんもいますよ。何度も送ったことあります、オリジナルパーツを。
なんで M2 の方が
9年前ぐらいにMR2 がモデルチェンジしてマイナーチェンジして、エンジンが同じ 3SGT でも、パワーアップバージョンの 3SGT が発売されたんですよね。で当時はトヨタからはその MR2 が DOHC の 2000cc のターボ車で、ライバルとして日産のシルビアも同じ 2000cc のターボ S14 シルビアで、三菱はランサーエボリューションで、スバルはインプレッサーっていう具合に車があったんですけど、日産のシルビアの人気がすごく高くて MR2 の人気はすごく低かったんですよ。でだけどそのライバルっていうのはやっぱ競い合って初めて場が全体的に盛り上がると思ったんで、じゃあ MR2 あまり人気のないマイナーな MR2 を一生懸命やることによって 2000cc の、そのマーケットでなんていうかな、にぎわえばいいなと思って MR2 を積極的に手がけ出したんですよ。
There's an interesting point there that during the late 90s, you had very much a 2-liter turbo class in Japan. And on the one hand, you had the Nissan Silvia as a rear-wheel drive car. The Subaru and Mitsubishi were both four-wheel drive. And the MR2 was rear drive, but also mid-engined. I think, obviously, the Silvias got popular because drifting got popular, although they were great for other uses as well. And the WRX and the Lancer got popular because of their success in rally, whereas MR2 didn't really appear in motorsport very much, and some people found it a bit hard to drive, especially the turbo one, because if you're an inexperienced driver and you got it sideways, it was very easy to wind up going backwards off the road. I think that's really what pushed down the popularity of it, even though it was a good-looking car and fun to drive. It just didn't seem to meet the market the same way.
そしたら日本中の世界中の MR2 ユーザーから結構支持されて、で盛り上がってMR2 がマイナーからメジャー路線へ脱皮していったような、そういう具合に思ってますね、僕らは。まだまだ数年は現役で活躍する車だと信じてるんで、今新しいエンジンを作ってます。でそれはうちには今赤色の MR2 と黄色い MR2 があって、その黄色い方にまず乗っけて、で04で9秒台ぐらいをセントラルサーキットで9秒台を出したいなと思ってます。基本的に仙台ハイランドはVHT が巻いてあるんですよね。でスタートダッシュがよく効くコースなんですけど、セントラルは普通のレース場で VHT が一切巻いてないんで、そこで出すタイムっていうのはすごく難しくて、そこで9秒 MR2 出したいなと思って。
Another interesting thing in Japan, in a way, there was more kudos of getting a good time at Central Circuit than there was for doing it at Sendai, because Central really wasn't a proper drag strip. It was just a normal straight on a racetrack. And I guess that also ties in with the idea of using street tires. You should be using them on a normal street.
エンジンも一応目標は900馬力ぐらい出るようなツインターボでやってみようかなと、思ってます。4月ぐらいには出来上がるんじゃないかな。まだ決まってないんですけど、今一生懸命エンジンを作ってるんで T67 のツインターボぐらいをやろうと思ってます。
At the auto salon, Phoenix's Power displayed this MR2, which they consider to be the ideal compromise for street use. The car uses many Phoenix's Power parts, including the full body kit.
ええ、馬力はそんな大したことない。普通の街乗りか。
400ぐらい。
430。
He gave himself a bit of a shock there. It was only running 1 bar of boost because it was obviously we're just on a regular street. But you may have noticed either side of the road it drops off because there's rice paddies on either side. So if you go off the road in that situation, there's a pretty good chance you'll wind up on your roof or at least on the side. You can see the Power of C controller on the dash there, just above my right knee. That was a very common sight in Japan back then, but it was also kind of a limiting factor of a Power of C. You had to do all the tuning through that little controller. I actually had one in my R34 as well, so they were quite effective, but they did have their limitations. So a little car like the MR2, that was quite decent power in a street car. It was very fun to ride around in.
乗りやすいし、静かで。エアコン OK。ないです。カントリー田舎な地域なんでサーキット場っていうのもないし、もう片道3時間ぐらいかけて行かないといけない、そういう場所なんで、基本的にもうほとんどのお客さんはやっぱストリート、もう街乗りができてそこそこ速くて楽しめる、そういう車をみんな求めてくるんで、そういう車をいい車を作ろうっていう努力はしてます。ターボ車なら何でもターボが好きで、ターボ車でしたらどんな車でも好きです。
もう最近はメーカーがターボ車はあんまりしないでしょ。
でボルトオンターボとかっていうのは興味ありますし、NA のノーマルアスピレーションの車にターボチャージャーをボルトオンしても日本では車検は問題ないんで、だからそれはどんどんこれからもやろうと思いますし、現に先ほど新型ソアラも拝見見てくださったと思いますけど、あれもツインターボにしてありますし、今度 Z もツインターボにしようと思ってますし、今年の3月の後半にはマツダの RX8 も納車されてくるんで、それもボルトオンターボしようと思ってますし。
That's an interesting point there that you can get away with having a bolt-on turbo kit and still get registration in Japan, or at least back then. Whereas from memory, changing the engine to a different engine was pretty much right out.
できるだけローコストでボルトンターボして今よりちょっと速くなればいいっていう、そういう車を作ってお客さんにどんどんフィードバックしていきたいなと。高い費用をかけて速い車を作ることは簡単なんですけど、それは一部の人の道楽っていうか一部の人の遊びでしかなくなるんで、それよりもローコストでたくさんの人にね楽しんでもらえる、そういう車を作りたいし、そういう技術を身につけたいっていう思いですね。
Yeah, that was quite a good interview, I thought. I didn't have great Japanese back then, but he understood everything I was asking him, so that's all that mattered, really. So it was certainly worth the train trip out there. Although I remember on the way back, I had a really hard time getting to Osaka. I think I was trying to get back to Osaka from Fukui, and I came within about 10 seconds of not getting off the train to get onto the next one because I hadn't been paying attention to the stations. What actually happened, I had a reserved ticket, so I had a particular seat that I had to sit in, and someone got on the train and they had the same seat reservation because they were on for the next leg. Amazingly, in Japan, they can be that precise with the tickets that they can have a different person on two different legs. So it was only when they came in and wanted to sit down that I realised, oh, hang on, I have to get off here. It's a little bit awkward, but I got away with it and got on the next train. Anyway, that's it for part 2 of High Performance Imports V7. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share this around. I'm enjoying doing these commentaries for the most part. So I'll be back again soon with part 3. Cheers.